What's going on, everybody? Hope you're having a wonderful night or day. Today I wanted to talk about some of the PTR changes we've seen for New World and how it affects the current state of the game when it will be applied. The first thing I want to talk about is the Paladin side of things. As you guys know, I've been playing this build since before launch happened, like around the closed beta was when I first started utilizing this and loving it a lot. And there's been some changes to it with the PTR coming out. Now, these changes haven't been applied yet, but when they do, it's going to change up a little bit of how we operate, but not that much. And the gap is starting to widen between the regular light armor threshold healers and the paladin healers. What they've done with this PTR is they've increased the light armor threshold bonus for healing by about 10%. So now you get a 30% bonus when you're in light armor threshold, as opposed to the heavy one that gets nothing. But we did see during the open beta that they did decrease the overall healing capacity by 20%. So technically, if you're wearing heavy armor, you are supposed to get a 20% reduction in your healing output. And that is something that wasn't being applied throughout the open beta and launch. It wasn't working properly, even though they put it in the patch notes. But I think with this PTR, it might start working. However, paladins are still going to be completely viable, and we're going to talk more about that in this video. And one of the things to mention as well is that anything that happens to the healers also affects the paladins, but as long as we're able to, as regular healers, put out a decent amount of healing, then paladins should not be that far behind. Same thing for tanks with the mitigation side of things. Because we also have perks that can still help us with our healing output, such as the Revitalizing Beacon and the Bless perk. These are ones that I highly recommend that you get as a paladin anyway, alongside any other ones that can give you more Fortify bonuses, such as Fortifying Sacred Ground or things like that. Because Fortify is also going to help us a lot if we're able to continually stack that up. That's more mitigation for us, less healing that we need, but when that healing does start to tick, we're still able to stay at that full health marker, so that way we don't have to worry about death nearly as much. And I want to talk about the life staff healing nerfs that they did do. I'm only going to talk about the life staff abilities and passives that we actually use in the Paladin build, because those are the ones that I utilize the most, so those are the ones I'm most familiar with right now. Same thing on the sword and shield side. If we do talk about any of that, that'll be the same thing there. One thing I want to talk about first is they did nerf the Blissful Touch passive, so that went from 20% to a 16% nerf on that one. For Sacred Ground, for the base healing, so for 20% weapon damage per second, that's gone down to 16%. The Holy Ground passive underneath that, that's gone from 100% stamina and mana regeneration to 50%, but there is going to be a really good alternative for that later. And for Orb of Protection, the Protector's Blessing was nerfed. The recovery went down from 7.5% to 6%. And another thing about the Orb of Protection, during the previous patch, I did get a lot of questions about this. They did make a change to where now we have to put all 4 points into the skill for it to benefit us the same way. So now what we have to do, we have to max it out, and then it's still going to apply that buff when you throw it on the ground as a paladin tank. So you can still stack up your beacon, Sacred Ground, and Orb of Protection all at the same time, but you need to make sure that you max it out. So what this does is it means that we have to take out 2 points of the other passives and things like that that we would have normally taken. So this is the current setup that I've got right now. For Beacon, I wish that I could get Radiance Blessing as well, but I did have to sacrifice it because Ben Light is too good of a passive for me to let go of, as well as Protector Strength. I really like having that one as well. So these are the ones that I've got right now, and I also love to go heavily into the left side tree for healing to get that Divine Blessing passive. So this is just kind of what we have to do right now as paladins, but overall that's not that heavy of a nerf, all things considered, because we still have the output even without the other 2 passives that we would have gotten. But either way, this is something that's good to know just in case you try it and it's not working. And then I want to talk about the possibilities of a Sword and Shield and Void Gauntlet tank build, but before that I want to give a quick word from our sponsor today, so please enjoy. Ekster is the world's largest small wallet brand that designs innovative solutions to improve the way that you carry your everyday items. They design high-end trackable wallets designed to keep your valuables safe, slim, and stylish. Just recently I was sent 3 products to test out. Their Senate card holder wallet with ease of access that features a slim design guaranteed to be less intrusive than a traditional wallet. The tracker card that you can connect to the Tripolo app so you can track your items, whether it be your wallet, handbag, backpack, etc. And the magnetic safe card holder that can be attached to your phone for keeping your cards intact, just in case you need to travel light. Right now they're having a Black Friday sale that started on November 4th and goes all the way to November 28th with an up to 40% discount off the entire site. Make sure to check out my affiliate link in the description below, and special thanks to Ekster for sponsoring this video. Now let's get back to it. Okay, now I want to talk about what I've tested out so far and what I've kind of learned about trying to do Void Gauntlet and tank setup. So coming into the PTR, the main thing I wanted to see is if Void Gauntlet could become a new sort of paladin, like a dark paladin weapon that we could utilize to further sustain ourselves while also tanking at the same time. Now, there are a few key, very interesting things about the Void Gauntlet that you can do on this side of things, but I would say that it doesn't really come close to the viability of having a life staff or like a hatchet in your secondary slot when it comes to tanking, mostly on the PvE side. Now, the reason I say that is because, well, let's take a look at their skills. So we've got the Petrifying Scream. This is very useful for rooting an enemy right in front of you. This is something that I think would be very good in PvP and was being utilized very often the first day of the PTR and PvP as well. We have the Void Blade right here, which is another one that we can utilize in PvP very effectively, but also PvE as well. Summons a Blade of Energy, kind of reminds me of Halo, and it's really fun to use, I'll give it that for sure. And then we have Oblivion over here. So Oblivion is one that allows you to summon this pool of darkness underneath you that does damage over time, but there's also another mechanic to it that is specifically very useful for tanks. Now what it does is it allows you to get these two upgrades, Withering Oblivion, which is not something that we really need to, utilize as a tank as much, but it would help a little bit too for reducing damage on like enemy mobs, for example. But Invigorating Oblivion is the one that is extremely strong on the stamina side. So that basically gives you plus 15 stamina per second for yourself and friendlies while inside the radius. The thing about this is, as you probably know, when you're blocking, you normally take damage to your stamina bar when attacks are coming in. Now your block stability on the shield is something that helps a lot when it comes to how much damage you take and how long you can block for before it gets broken. So having that plus 15 stamina regeneration underneath you while you're tanking is incredible. And the nice thing about the Oblivion is that it can stay down even when you switch to another weapon. So alongside stacking with like the Ice Gauntlet Storm, this is another thing that you can utilize for tanking as well, especially on a boss like Scylla in the Lazarus Expedition, where you're just standing in one place most of the time trying to tank and not trying to die as she increases in stacks. And having this down will allow you to stay up for a little bit longer before she breaks your block, or allow you to regenerate much faster when she actually does break your block finally. So I do like it for that. We also do have this skill called the Baleful Tether. I'm not going to show this one, but it basically just kind of like forms a chain between you and your enemy when you cast this. Unfortunately, it does not stay up when you switch to other weapons, but it still can be utilized, especially for like mage builds, or if you're using the Void Gauntlet primarily, like for an int build, for example. It's something that might increase your damage quite a bit against the target as long as you keep it on them. The orb right here, this is called the Orb of Decay, and what it does is it fires an unblockable orb that passes through enemies, and then what happens is that it will give them a status effect called Disintegrate. That's a debuff that gets onto them that can stack up to 3 times, but at max range. And what that means is that when the orb travels the full distance that it's supposed to, and it always travels the full distance, it's going to start coming back. And then what will happen is that on its way back, it turns into a healing orb, passing through your allies and healing them, and also coming back to you and healing you at the same time. One thing to note is that the orb itself goes back to the same exact place that it came from. So if you cast it right where I'm standing and then I move to the side, it's not going to come back here where I'm at right now. Just like you saw, it's going to come back to the original position. So this is something that can be kind of tough in PvP. I was also testing on mobs a little bit earlier, and it was kind of annoying trying to get this to go off properly, because normally a lot of the time when you're fighting mobs, they still have their stagger, of course, like we know, and just in general, mobs tend to push you back even if you're blocking in the middle of combat. And if you're off by even just a little bit on the distance when it comes to this orb returning back to you, so let's say I get pushed back a couple feet backwards, it's not going to trigger onto me. Now, one thing that I did leave as feedback is that it would be nice if the orb came back a little bit farther on the distance side when it is coming back to you, just to make sure that you can get that healing effect as well. But the last skill I'll point out is Essence Rupture. This fires a projectile that inflicts the rupture for 10 seconds. It heals anybody that hits the target for about 20% of the damage done. However, if you get one of these other passives just down here, Overflowing Essence, when the Essence Rupture ends, then anybody within 4 meters of the target is going to be healed for 80%. So combining this with the orb can kinda, get us a little bit of sustain as a tank if we really want to. Also, the fact that this does scale primarily with intelligence, but secondarily with focus, means that as a paladin tank, we can utilize this a little bit better than a regular tank could, but it's still not enough to warrant replacing the life staff or the hatchet like I was saying before. Now we do have these ultimates here, Void Caller and Glimpse of the Void. Void Caller is the one that you'll probably want to utilize a little bit more as a melee person, but what happens is that at 6 stacks of this, you consume all the stacks and gain a 3-meter aura that heals yourself and friendlies for 30% of the weapon damage, and also deals damage to foes within the area. So this is something that as you're using the abilities can also generate a little bit more healing on you. But like I said, it's still, not enough to really warrant replacing one of those weapons. And for example, if we had a Carnelian compatible taunt on any one of these skills, but Petrifying Scream would be a great one, I think, to have that. It would also make sense. But personally, I would also take the Oblivion. And if we had a taunt on either one of these skills, what it would allow us to do is, like the hatchet, allow us to generate an AoE taunt much more frequently than if we're just using the sword and shield by itself, to use Shield Bash and Defiant Stance to use our taunts alongside the Final Blow, of course, and the Intimidating Shield Bash passives. But because it doesn't have that, can't really utilize it in that way with having a Carnelian gem inside. But if they were to add something like that, I think it'd be perfect. But we'll have to see how they actually implement this into the live game, because as we know, anything that we see on the PTR is subject to change. And they're doing this testing primarily so they can gain feedback to see if they need to change anything else before they bring it to live. But one thing I will say that I have noticed is that using this Void Gauntlet with mage builds, for example, like if you use Ice Gauntlet and the Void Gauntlet, Fire Staff Void Gauntlet, it seems like it can be pretty powerful if you use it correctly, because like I said, they're both primary intelligence. So that's something that you can utilize with both weapons and get the full benefits of. And because Oblivion does stay down when you switch to another weapon, that means that you could utilize both this and Ice Storm on the Ice Gauntlet together to generate a lot of AoE DPS in a short amount of time. There's also other builds that I had seen, like melee type of builds, because the Void Blade can be used to turn the Void Gauntlet into a melee build. And one thing to notice is that if you're just using the regular basic attacks, this is what the animation looks like. And then if you use the heavy, you'll see this here. And then when you actually cast the heavy, you'll notice it doesn't tell you outright, but if you go in here into the skill menu, it actually says that it heals you for 20% of the damage done. So this is something that you could also incorporate into the, if you wanted to use this alongside your tank build, then you can totally do that too. But one thing I will say about using it with the tank build is that you can also just bring a healer that has a Void Gauntlet, and if they cast Essence Rupture on the target to get that overflowing essence, or I'm sorry, the Invigorating Rupture for that plus 15 stamina regeneration, because you can get that too. Or if they just cast Oblivion next to you, it's going to do the exact same thing. You don't have to be the one with the Void Gauntlet as well. And this is how it looks when you're utilizing the Void Blade itself. It's a very cool set of combos that you got here. But that's all for that side of things. And also, you can use the Void Gauntlet, like I said, as a good support weapon for the life staff, so that's something to keep in mind too. And another thing I want to talk about is I was able to find out details on the epic Void Gauntlet that you get from the Questline. This comes at a 580 gear score, 9 focus, 19 intelligence, comes with the Fire Gem, Corrupted Bane for the first perk, and then Voracious Blade for the second. And this allows you to get a lifesteal buff while you're below 50% health, and then any successful Void Blade hits that you do will heal you for about 29% of the damage done. So this is something that can be incredibly useful if you do plan for going for a Void Gauntlet melee build, like if you're going to do Ent, focus, maybe do like a Void Gauntlet Rapier or Void Gauntlet and Fire Staff, something like that. But I also was able to look at the rest of the Void Gauntlet perks, the ability perks, and I'll go ahead and showcase them up here. And I was hoping that these might spark some more ideas for potential builds that we could do on the healing side, but it looks like it's more on the debuff side with a little bit of healing. However, there are some anti-heal mechanics when it comes to the Void Gauntlet, and that is something that I think we could utilize very effectively in the future, because that's something that we have been lacking for quite a while now, other than if you count like the infected throw from the hatchet, but that's not really something that lasts long enough. However, in the future, because we did see the Angry Earth staff was data mined, if they did allow you to put the blight buff on people, that would be an incredibly powerful debuff to have and would probably counter healing outright without some balancing to it. But other changes in the PTR are things like the speed buff we get on the roads now. That was pretty interesting that they did that, because I wasn't expecting something like that for a while. Of course, we have the new humanoid NPC mobs, which makes me think that we might see more human enemies in the future. The trading post on the PTR is also now unified, and I was kind of curious if this would benefit or hinder the market, which way that would go kind of thing. One thing I will say though is that I learned that when you're in the outposts, it looks like you are able to utilize those trading posts to buy things too. So that makes me wonder how that's going to work with the tax system, because people might be able to avoid the tax system altogether by going to one of these outposts and using the trading post there instead. So that might be something to look at before the game goes to live. It should probably be settlement based so that people can't do that, but I guess we'll have to see how that goes. I also saw that the Well Guardian had its HP reduced to about 1 million. That's the big angry earth ogre that you have to fight at some point during the main story questline, and the health was originally, or in the live version, is around 21 million, so that's a big jump, a big difference. We also have the change that the materials needed for crafting a dungeon orb have been reduced. I saw this one on Reddit and thought it was a pretty good change, but me personally, I still feel like it would be great if we could trade the mats to make the orb amongst ourselves, but that might also overflow the market, so who knows. It's something I still wish that we could do though. The last thing is that there was also some datamine details discovered from the PTR files, some cleanup for content and development such as Brimstone Sands, Isabella's Lair, and Iridanus Caverns, Twitch company crests and armor dice potentially coming soon, lots of tracking for anti-bot / gold seller, which is definitely needed, new partial ban penalties, Greatsword getting some more work done to it, Blunderbuss as well, something called random encounters being worked on, which I really hope means more dynamic events or just different types of content in general, and several other changes such as a big increase on the needed experience for crafting levels, which means you should definitely get your crafting levels maxed out if you can before this happens, balance changes, and holiday events too. But that's all for now. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you have a wonderful night or day, and I'll catch you next time.